Oh, my pleasure. Very happy to be here.
I'm having a good day, Jimmy. This is my third
Mhm.
hour of radio with you today. That makes for a
Yeah.
good day. Yeah.
Yeah, we pre-recorded this morning a couple of hours of weird Christmas questions. So
Yeah.
people came up with some weird questions that were Christmas themed, and we answered 2 hours of them, and that'll be airing in the near future.
Yeah, when we ask people for weird questions, you never know what you're going to get. But then you kind of narrow that down with weird Christmas questions. But people did it. They came up with some very good weird Christmas questions for Jimmy to answer. So as Jimmy said, that'll be airing before too long right here. Jimmy, you are also the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. So maybe you should let us know right up front what's on tomorrow. What drops tomorrow?
Tomorrow is about a man that some have called, that Time Magazine actually called the godfather of the New Age movement. His name is Carlos Castaneda. He published a bunch of books back in the 1970s about his experiences with a Yaqui sorcerer named Don Juan.
Yeah.
And he had a mysterious group of followers that all vanished after his
It
death.
did not
So,
end well. I am
yeah,
so glad
so,
you're doing that. I've
yeah.
always wondered why more people don't know about Carlos Castaneda. This whole New Age thing, he's like you said, he's one of the fathers of it, and really bad. like if you really want to get into some bad stuff, Carlos Castaneda is your guy.
Yeah, well, as always, we keep the show family friendly, but he was a very mysterious guy. Time magazine in 1973 described him as a mystery wrapped in a riddle wrapped in a tortilla. And I think that's a pretty accurate description. So we're going to delve
I'd
into
add
the
a
mystery of
deception to
Carlos
that.
Castaneda.
Well, UCLA doesn't come out looking very good in this either. With
No,
the
they don't.
Yeah, okay, I can. This one I'm looking forward to. I've always wondered why don't more people know about Carlos Castaneda, and Jimmy is going to make it happen tomorrow on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Today it's open forum. You can call with any question you have. 888-318-7884 888 Truth. Already a bunch of folks on the line, so we'll just go straight to phones in St. Louis, Missouri, watching on YouTube Live. We start with Joseph. Joseph, thanks for being with us. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you guys for the work that you do, and thank you for having me on today.
Well, thank you, Joseph.
Yeah. So my question has to deal with God and the problem of pain. So to be concise and to the point, I've read C.S. Lewis's book, The Problem of Pain, and I've gone through all of his arguments about how God uses pain as a justice for bad people and as a mercy to help them do better. He uses pain to keep moral people from becoming complacent. Okay, I get that. But my problem, and I'm really confused on this, and I thought about it for hours and I can't understand it, is why God allows things like natural disasters or things that aren't related with people to happen to good people. Like I heard a story recently on Telemundo. They were recording like this flood happened to several villages in Honduras, and thousands of people were displaced. So,
All right, so let's let Jimmy. Why does stuff like that happen, Jimmy?
Well, there is an element of mystery here, and we can't give a definitive answer in particular cases. Now, we know the general answer to the question of why does God allow evil things to happen or harmful things. Dinosaurs were the alpha predators. They were the ones in the top slots. But by emptying out those top slots, it allowed over millions of years a whole new set of life forms to come about, including the emergence of man. And so we as human beings actually owe our existence to a major natural disaster that occurred in Earth's history. So the takeaway lesson from that is there is some good that God will bring about, but it may take a while for it to happen. And certainly any dinosaur that survived the extinction event 60 million years ago would not be around to see the good that came out of it. And in the same way, if something happens that is a physical evil in our day, we may not be around to see the payoff, the good that God's bringing out of it, but we will know in the next life, and this is something that the Catechism also addresses, we will have greater insight into this in the next life, and we'll be able to see how God was at work bringing goods out of particular evils that happened. If you'd like more about this, Joseph, I'd suggest getting a copy of a DVD talk I did a few years ago. You can go to shop.catholic.com and pick it up. It's got an easy title to remember. It's just called The Problem of Evil. So check out the Problem of Evil DVD by me, and I'll be able to go into the subject at more length. Hope that helps you out, Joseph.
Thanks, Joseph. Appreciate the... Oh, sorry, Jimmy. Didn't mean to step on you. Let's just take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Open Forum with Jimmy Akin right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
It's all about the truth. Catholic Answers Live.
Hi, this is Cy. You think Hallmark Christmas movies are good? You should try Catholic Answers Focus. It's like Advent in a podcast. This week, Father Hugh Barber explains Marian consecration. And then on Wednesday, Father Robert McTague tackles the problem of worldviews. Ever feel like you share a planet with a bunch of people who all live in their own worlds? That's a modern problem, and Father McTague has some solutions. Catholic Answers Focus. Get it wherever you get your podcasts. Watch it twice a week on YouTube or listen anytime at CatholicAnswersFocus.com.
The EWTN home video highlight for December is the EWTN Family Christmas Special. The choir of the Eternal Word Television Network performs classical Christmas carols with a special commentary by Father Joseph Mary Wolfe. Order your DVD or CD at EWTNRC.com 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or call 1-800-854-6316.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Thanks for being with us on this Thursday Advent afternoon as we all prepare for Christmas. Hope your preparations are going well. Jimmy Akin is our guest. It's open forum. About 1 million people on the line, so we'll keep going to those calls. We'll go now to Devante in Odessa, Texas, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Devante, nice to hear from you again. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
How are you guys today?
Very well, thank you.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to briefly say thank you guys for whenever you sent me Jimmy's book on the drama of salvation. I have been challenged in a healthy way about some of my views on specifically where Jimmy talks about boasting in the context of Romans. So thank you. I enjoy being challenged to be more biblical.
Awesome.
My question is about apostolic succession, and it does not take many lectures to watch to understand that Catholics think apostolic succession is very important. My question is, whenever it comes to apostolic succession, is what is meant by that? Is it just like Peter is the first bishop of Rome? Stephen was also a bishop of Rome. Therefore, Stephen is a successor of Peter. Or is it that and a matter of doctrinal agreement? Like, is it just that both of them were bishops of Rome? Or is it other factors outside of just lineage?
So apostolic succession can be understood in more than one way. There's more than one dimension to it. And there is a sense of in which doctrine and tradition and scripture are all related to apostolic succession. But the fundamental core idea, and what people are going to mean most of the time when you hear a discussion of apostolic succession, is they mean that the bishops down through history succeed the apostles. So Jesus initially entrusted the governance of the church to his apostles, but he didn't continue to appoint apostles after the first century, even though he could have. You know, Paul was not a follower of Jesus during his life, but Jesus in Acts chapter 9 appeared to Paul and commissioned him as an apostle. And there's no reason that Jesus couldn't have continued to appoint new apostles all the way down through history by appearing to people the same way he appeared to St. Paul. So it was Jesus's choice that the ministry of apostle not continue beyond the first century. But it also was his will that his church continue down through all of history to the end of time. And that meant that his church would need leaders, and the apostles understood this. And so, as we read in the book of Acts, over the course of time, the apostles begin appointing additional leaders like deacons and presbyters to lead the church. And then when they began themselves to pass from the scene, they appointed the bishops to be the supreme leaders of the church. So the bishops of the world are the successors of the apostles as the highest governors of the earthly church, as its highest shepherds. And the way that manifests is by, and we read about this a little bit in the New Testament, but through the rite of ordination, which is done by placing, by the laying on of hands by one person who is in holy orders, placing his hands on the head of another person who enters holy orders. And that's done at all three levels of holy orders. It's done when someone becomes a deacon, it's done when someone becomes a presbyter or a priest, in other words, and it's done when someone becomes a bishop. And when we talk about apostolic succession, we're talking about the fact that there are, for every bishop in the world who's validly ordained, there is a line of the laying on of hands going back to the apostles themselves. Now, in some cases, we can document that line going back further with precision, and we know like exactly who it was that laid hands on this guy. But that's the general concept, that there is this organic chain down through history that goes all the way back to the apostles through the line of ordination of bishops. And because they are the supreme governors of the church, the supreme shepherds, they're guided in special ways by the Holy Spirit. And that's why they're the highest teachers in the church. And so there is a sharing of faith, of doctrine, that accompanies apostolic succession, but it's the chain of ordinations themselves that are the concrete form that takes.
Devontae, I'm going to say thanks. It's always nice to get to talk with you. There are lots of folks on the line, so we're going to keep moving today to try to get as many as we can. But thank you for the call and for the very kind words about Jimmy Akin's book, The Drama of Salvation. Let's go to Bryce in Ogden, Utah, watching on Facebook Live. Bryce, thank you for joining us. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hey, guys. So I would consider myself an epistemological solipsist, meaning the only post priori knowledge I believe we can truly have is self-existence, and everything beyond that is a matter of faith. Now, that hasn't kept me from having faith in all of the Catholic teachings. I have faith that my eyes are seeing like the real world and not a illusion. I'm not a head and a brain or anything like that. My question is this view of knowledge compatible with Catholicism, or is it a form of heresy in the form of fideism that I am putting too much of a separation between reason and faith? Thank you.
You're operating on a different level than the way the heresy of fideism is commonly understood. Fideism is commonly understood to mean things like we can't have knowledge of, let's say, God's existence based on anything but pure faith. We can't prove it, in other words, using various philosophical principles. And we similarly have to have faith in a whole wide range of things connected with the faith for which there is no possibility of proof. So that's how fideism is normally understood. It's that you just have to accept certain core truths of the faith, like God's existence, without any proof whatsoever. And that's not the church's position. The church holds that that we can, using various principles, demonstrate God's existence as well as establish credibility for various other truths like the resurrection of Christ and the miracles of Christ, for example, and that we have evidence of that. Now, what Bryce is doing is operating on a kind of higher level. And it doesn't strike me as being automatically incompatible with what the church teaches, because the church recognizes that in any discussion, you have to start with certain axioms or certain basic principles that you use to then derive your conclusions. This is something that, for example, the mathematician Euclid is famous for. If you read Euclid's book, The Elements, which deals with geometry, he starts with like 5 basic assumptions or axioms, which are principles that he believes are true, even though he has no way to prove them. An example is if you have 2 parallel lines that are exactly parallel to each other, they will never meet. So no matter if they're an inch apart from each other and they're strictly parallel to each other, they will always be an inch apart from each other. They will never converge to a single point. And that seems true, and it seems intuitively true. People do have this clear intuition that if 2 lines are truly parallel, they won't ever meet. But Euclid couldn't prove that, and so he used it as one of his 5 basic assumptions or axioms, which he then used to manufacture dozens and dozens and dozens of proofs of other mathematical truths. And the same thing is true in any discussion, because in any discussion you use logic. And logic also involves certain basic assumptions or axioms. They have fancy names in Latin, which I won't go into, but to give an example, one of the principles in logic is if A, then B. So if you have a mammal, if you have a boy, then he's a mammal, because all boys are mammals. And if you then say, so you've got if A, then B, and you then as a second premise say, okay, we've got an A, and you can conclude from that B. So if A, then B, A, therefore B. That's a fundamental principle in logic. If you have a boy, then he's a mammal. This is a boy, therefore this is a mammal. Well, that basic principle in logic is, or at least some basic principles in logic, cannot be proved. You have to assume them in order to do any logical reasoning at all. And so what you want to do is try to select those basic principles that you have a high degree of confidence in, that seem just obviously true, and use those so your logical reasoning will have the best foundation possible. But those initial axioms, because you can't prove them, you could say, well, I'm taking them on faith because I don't have proof of them. So whether it's a logical principle or a geometrical principle like Euclid had, there are certain basic starting points that you just take on faith, so to speak, because there's no way to prove the basic principles in a non-circular way. And so consequently, what Bryce is saying sounds to me like he's just describing that position in an alternate way, because he says he believes that his senses really do tell us about the world. He doesn't have proof that that's the case, but it seems obviously the case, and he accepts that. So it doesn't seem to me that what Bryce is articulating would fall afoul of the principle of fideism being a heresy, because the church acknowledges that in order to construct any proof, there are certain unprovable assumptions you have to start with that just seem obvious, and Bryce seems to be willing to accept those.
Bryce, thank you very much. It's open forum. Jimmy Akin, our guest. Mark in Houston is next, listening on Guadalupe Radio, 1430 AM. Mark, go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Oh, thank you. I had a question. It's Matthew 26. There was the parable about the master and the servant that buried his talent, and
right.
And so the master came back, and the servant said, I know you reap where you did not sow, so I was in fear of you, and I don't understand why there would be this reference to someone that reaps but does not sow.
Okay. So ordinarily, if someone is a landowner who's an agriculturalist, as landowners tended to be back then, they or their servants will go out into the field at planting time and they'll sow seed. And then when the seed matures, they come back at harvest time and they reap the crops that they themselves sowed. And so if someone reaps where they did not sow, what that means is the person's a thief. The person is going beyond his own fields and taking crops out of other people's fields. And someone who would do that is someone who's very greedy. And so in this parable, the image of the master, this is one of those parables like the unjust judge, where Jesus is using a broken human being to teach us something about God who is not broken. But in this parable, the master is, as the servant says, he is a hard man, he's difficult to get along with, and he's a thief. He reaps where he does not sow. That's how concerned he is about money. And so that's why the servant is afraid of his master, because he's afraid if I invest this money and I lose it, I'm going to be in huge trouble. So I did the minimum I could to make sure I didn't lose this money, and I just buried it. You know, I kept it secret, I kept it safe, so now I can give it back to my master. And so that's the logic on the servant's part. He's afraid that if he invested the money, he would lose it, and consequently his master would abuse him. And he doesn't want that to happen because he knows how concerned his master is about money. But he doesn't realize that, no, his master is not going to be satisfied with that. He should have at least given the money to the bankers so that there could be some minimal interest. Even if he wasn't going to fully invest it, there should at least be some minimal interest that the master wants. And Jesus here is using this example of a greedy, broken master to teach us a truth, which is we shouldn't just do the minimum. We need to go beyond the minimum in the service of God. God is not greedy. God is not a harsh master, but we can use the image of a harsh master to learn that we need to invest the talents God has given us.
Thanks, Mark. Got to take a break. Jimmy Akin, our guest. Open forum. 888-31-TRUTH is the number.
Catch Catholic Answers live anytime at Catholic.com.
If you spend any time on Twitter, Facebook, or mainstream media, you're probably familiar with the litany of slogans that skeptics employ to rescue you from the foolish belief that God exists. The constant onslaught seems to leave people with the idea that they have no alternative but to embrace atheism. How can a Christian respond? In One Less God Than You, John DeRosa breaks down 20 of the most common atheist challenges and shows you how to craft effective answers. Atheism is more aggressive and widespread than ever. Read One Less God Than You and prepare yourself to respond with the joyful truth that God is real. To get your copy of One Less God Than You, visit shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
To many people, even many Christians, purgatory is a fantasy, or worse, a wicked lie invented by the church to make salvation complicated and keep people in fear. But I'm here to tell you that purgatory is fact, not fiction. The Bible supports it, Christians have historically believed in it, and it makes theological sense. In my new book, Purgatory is for Real, I provide the evidence and reasoning to help you understand this controversial doctrine and demonstrate how it's actually a joyful, hopeful reality, not something shadowy and mysterious, but a sign of God's love and mercy. To get your copy of Purgatory is for Real, visit shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Tomorrow on More to Life, peace be with you.
Do you feel like someone or something is robbing you of your peace? We'll help you find rest.
That's tomorrow on More to Life. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. It's open forum. It's Thursday. There'll probably be some music coming in here before too long of the groovy variety. Jimmy Akin, our guest, all seems right with the world, and so let us progress. Let's just keep making progress, and we'll go on to our next caller. The number, if you want to call, is 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. Let's go to Deacon Russ in Edinburgh, Indiana. Listening on or watching on Catholic.com. Deacon, are you there with us?
I am. Thanks, Hi.
Deacon, some
Jimmy,
people are named Deacon and some people are a deacon. So which one are you?
I am a deacon.
Oh, okay. Okay, it's very nice to have you, Deacon. All right, very good.
Yes. Jimmy, I enjoy listening to your mysterious world. I went back and listened to your mystery of dieting the other day. Mm-hmm. And you've gotten me to where I'm eating one meal a day now, but I don't do it for a dieting reason. I do it for a ascetical reason. But two aspects of my questions. One is, do you have a suggestion for an alternative to the food pyramid? And then the other is, if you fast for longer than a day, what's a good way to break a fast? My body doesn't always like to re-engage when it's been without food for a couple days.
Okay, so in terms of the food pyramid is a fairly recent thing that the United States, I'll put it this way, the USDA came up with it a few decades ago, and it has a broad base because it's a pyramid, and in the broad base you got a lot of carbohydrates, and then you move up from there and you get a little bit of fat and protein, and at the top, they recommend you have dairy products and things like that, and few, if any, sweets. So what the recommendation is for a carbohydrate heavy diet. And the food pyramid was introduced back when I was growing up. And now we're dealing with a scientific question here rather than a theological question. I want to make that clear to folks. But the USDA did not base this on scientific studies. You know what the USDA is? Psi. Do you have any idea what USDA stands for?
The United States... United States. It's something with the United States. I'm pretty clear on that.
It is. Good. It stands for the United States Department of Agriculture. Now, would you suspect that the United States Department of Agriculture is a bunch of experts in medicine and what the human body needs, or are they experts in how you grow food for a profit?
I would think it would be the latter.
Yeah, and it so happens carbohydrates can be sold at a higher profit than dairy and meat because they have longer shelf lives. You can have a packet of spaghetti on the shelf for years without refrigeration, but you cannot have a packet of meat on the shelves or a packet of eggs on the shelf for years without refrigeration. So the profit margins are higher for carbohydrates than they are for animal food. And you then think about, so this is a little bit like having the tobacco industry in charge of cancer research. These are not the right people to be making these recommendations. Then, if you think about our ancestors, we grew up in, evolutionarily speaking, in the Paleolithic age, in the Stone Age, and that was before agriculture. So our ancestors were hunter-gatherers. Now, there's been some modification due to evolution in the last few thousand years, but still, our ancestors did not grow up farming wheat. Their fat and protein from animal hunting was a big part of their diet. So were nuts that the gatherers would find. So there's reason to think, and some recent studies have supported this, that a diet that is not that heavy in carbohydrates will be healthier. And in fact, the USDA has been backing off of the food pyramid. In recent years, they've started to modify it so it looks more like a plate with kind of different quarters in it. And that is a reflection of the fact that the studies that have been done in the last few decades have not supported the idea that a heavily carbohydrate-laden diet is the best one for most people. Now, individuals vary, so there's not a one-size-fits-all diet. But in general, I would say that a diet that is lower in carbohydrates and higher in fat and protein is likely to be healthier for most people. I don't say eat no carbohydrates. I mean, if you want to go full keto, you can, but I don't think that's necessary because we are omnivores. We did evolve to be able to eat carbohydrates, so there is a place for them in our diet. I think one of the healthiest things a person can do, and Deacon Russ has commented on this already, is change your eating schedule. So you're not constantly eating a little bit at, multiple times a day. If you adopt that grazing strategy, it leads to a bunch of problems. And I talk about some of those. If you want to learn why I recommend fasting for various reasons for many people, not everybody, you can go to jimmyakin.com/fast. where I have a bunch of resources you can check out there. In terms of the second part of Deacon Russ's question, how to reintroduce food once you've been fasting for a period and you're not really wanting to eat, what many people who do multi-day fasts will do in order to break the fast is start with something easy, something light, maybe a little bit of soup or a little bit of juice or a little bit of broth. And that will reactivate your body's food digestion and consumption system and make it easier to get back to eating regular food.
Thanks, Deacon Russ. Appreciate the call. I'm going to keep moving, try to get another call in before we have to take another break. We've got 2 hours with Jimmy and lots of folks on the line, so we'll try to get to everybody. Let's go to Kathleen in Saginaw, Michigan, listening on Ave Maria Radio, 1440 AM. Kathleen, go ahead with your question for Jimmy Akin.
Okay. Hi. Thank you for taking my call. My question is animal cruelty a sin? And are people who are involved with helping animals, such as the various groups like the Humane Society and the ASPCA, the various volunteers that go out of their way to help animals, is their service considered a kind of a service to God in a similar way to the people who help abused children?
Okay. So animal cruelty, meaning the deliberate, unnecessary infliction of pain or distress on animals, is a sin. We shouldn't inflict pain or distress on animals unnecessarily at all. And we certainly shouldn't take malicious delight in it. Animal cruelty is a sin. And consequently, efforts to help prevent animal cruelty and to care for animals that have been subjected to cruelty is a service to God because it's caring for his creation. So in principle, that work is great. At the same time, in our culture, there are some exaggerations that are involved in this area. Serving God by caring for animals that have been subject to cruelty is valuable, but it's not as valuable as caring for children who have been subjected to cruelty, because children are not animals. They are much more valuable than animals. As Jesus talks about in the Sermon on the Mount, God knows and cares when a sparrow falls from the sky, but he says, don't worry, you guys are worth many sparrows. Humans are much more valuable than animals. And so consequently, even though it serves God to care for any of his creatures that have been subjected to cruelty, whether animals or children, the two are not the same. It's much more important to care for children. In the same way, the needs of human beings are much more important than the needs of animals. And this is a failure to recognize this has led some people in our culture to think that certain acts are cruel to animals when they really don't fit the definition of cruelty. Cruelty involves the unnecessary infliction of pain when there's not a justifying reason for it. But not all infliction of pain is unjustified. Even in human beings, if you have a child and you don't want the child to get a disease, or the child has a disease and needs to be cured of it, you may take that child to the doctor to get a shot. Well, that shot is going to involve some pain. But giving the shot is not cruelty, because there is a reason, there is a justification for the pain, which is getting the child over the disease. In the same way, not all infliction of pain or distress on animals is cruelty, because there can be a legitimate reason. In fact, animals do this to each other. In the case of a lion going after a gazelle, well, the lion inflicts pain and distress on the gazelle, but there's a reason. The lion needs to eat. Lions are obligate carnivores, meaning that they can't eat anything but meat, and they have to go after some kind of animal like a gazelle, or they're going to starve. So there's a reason for the pain that a lion inflicts on the gazelle. In the same way, humans need to eat, and it's very hard to get adequate nutrition without animal food in your diet, especially the B vitamins. And so consequently, it is reasonable for humans to hunt or farm or get animal food in various other ways so that they can have meat and eggs and dairy. It's legitimate. If humans need to test something out, like a vaccine, and find out, is this safe and effective for humans? We don't want to start by testing it on humans. We want to start by testing it on animals, because if there are big problems, it should show up in animals that are similar to us early on. And consequently, doing research on animals is legitimate too, if it serves human needs. So it's true, animal cruelty is a sin, and preventing animal cruelty is a service to God, but we need to be careful that we don't go into misunderstandings that would put animals on the same level as human beings, and that would regard all infliction of pain or distress as cruelty, and so forth.
Kathleen, thank you. We'll just leave it right there because we got to take a quick break, and there are lots and lots of folks on the line. Lines do open up from time to time, however, and if you would like to call with your question for Jimmy Akin, 888-318-7884 is the number right now at shop.catholic.com. We do have savings on hundreds of items, a great big huge store-wide sale going on, books, CDs, DVDs, School of Apologetics. It's not too late to get things in the mail either, but if you feel it is, well, we've got hundreds of digital gifts with ebooks, MP3s, e-magazines, and all that you can give. Just visit right now, shop.catholic.com, and take a look at all the savings.
Call us now with your question on Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
He was a pope, a saint, and a doctor of the Church.
Matthew Bunson and the Doctors of the Church.
Pope St. Gregory I the Great is one of only 4 popes honored as the Great. Among his many achievements was sending missionaries across Northern Europe, especially St. Augustine of Canterbury, who brought Christ to the people of England. In a pun, Pope Gregory called the English people angels. He died in 604.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
Go forth and preach the good news. It's not just a suggestion. If you want to take more seriously the command of Jesus to share the gospel with those around you, consider joining St. Paul Street Evangelization. It's a grassroots organization that brings the Catholic faith to the streets in a non-confrontational way. Visit our website, www.streetevangelization.com, to learn more. And don't forget to like us on Facebook. It's time to do our part.
on standby, ready for a little bit of groovy music, but it didn't happen yet, which is good. It means it's still good, still in our future. Jimmy Akin, our guest. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. It's open forum today. Anybody can call with any question, 888-318-7884. I always like to try to make this invitation as clear as I can, that if you're not a Christian person and you'd like to ask a question about the faith, about the Bible, you're welcome here too. You're always welcome. 888-318-7884. Now we go to Efren in Stanton, California, watching on YouTube. Efren, you there with us?
Yes, sir. Hi.
Hi.
First, I'm a huge fan of you guys. You guys are amazing.
Well, thank you. Wow. Thank you.
I love the person who runs your guys' Twitter. He's super cool. So,
Mike Thomas will be happy
you know
to hear
what?
you say that.
I think he might be within earshot too. So, if he's not, we'll let him know. But that's very nice of you. Thank you, Efren.
Yeah, sweet. So my question is based off a priest. His name's Father.
Please, let me stop you right there. I don't like to comment about people, especially if I'm not familiar with what they've said, because I don't know what they've said, and there could be something that has been lost in the transmission. So rather than talking about this priest, why don't you tell me the position you'd like me to react to, and then ask your question about that position.
Sweet. Okay, so the question is, are aliens demons? And I would like to see what you think about it, and if you could either fight for that position or against it.
All right. Okay. Fair enough. Thank you, Efren.
Well, so the idea that demons might be responsible for reports of UFOs and alien abductions and things like that has been proposed. And I think it's a possibility that at least in some cases needs to be, considered. I don't think that it's the only explanation for these things. I think that we need to be open to a variety of different explanations, because I don't think there's a single explanation for these reports. I think we can pretty easily show that there are multiple explanations. Some of the explanations are purely natural. For example, the one that has been pointed out is people sometimes misidentify stars or planets like Venus, and because they seem to follow you in the sky, and if you don't realize, hey, that's Venus, you could think that's a strange light following me. And so there's misidentification of natural phenomena like Venus and so forth. That's responsible for some reports of UFOs. Also, sometimes people lie. Sometimes people want attention or money or are just having a joke on other people, and they do hoaxes. So hoaxes are another explanation for some UFO reports and some abduction reports. Other times, people may be misidentifying a real craft in the sky. It's just one that they're not familiar with. For example, back in the 1960s at Area 51 out in Nevada, they were developing a couple of planes that were meant to be spy planes. One of them was for the Air Force, and it later became known as the SR-71 Blackbird. And the other, which was a CIA plane, was called the Oxcart. And they're very close to each other. But because they were spy planes, they needed to do certain things that were different than other planes. They needed to fly very high so that they couldn't be hit by weapons. They needed to be very lightweight, or they needed to go very fast also. So they needed to fly high, go faster than other planes so they couldn't be caught, and they needed to be very lightweight so they could go on long-term missions behind the Iron Curtain. And that meant that they needed to have as much fuel as possible and weigh as little as possible. And so one of the things they did was they frequently would not paint them. So you could have an Oxcart that was this silver thing from the outside, and they had a body form, a silhouette, that if you looked at it a certain way, it would look like a saucer, because if you look at it from the right angle, you don't see the wings. And so what happened was in the 60s, UFO reports in the vicinity of Area 51, where they were testing these things, spiked. And pilots would see something up high in the sky, higher than planes normally go, moving faster than planes normally go. It would look like a silver disk or even a glowing disk if the sunlight was hitting it the right way. And UFO reports spiked, and it was a craft. It was just one of ours. And that accounted for some UFO reports. Also, some alien abduction reports are cases of sleep paralysis, where a person wakes up with part of their brain, but the part that lets them move freely does not wake up, and they feel like I'm awake, but I'm paralyzed, and their dream module in their brain is fabricating content to explain why I'm awake but can't move, and it comes up with maybe aliens are doing it. In the past, it would be other supernatural things. So I think there are multiple different explanations for alien-related phenomena, many of them natural. But that doesn't show they're all natural. It's quite possible that some of them have exotic explanations as well. A common exotic explanation is extraterrestrials, people from another planet. Another is extraterrestrials, people from another time, or interdimensionals, people from another dimension, or demons. All of those are possible, but in order to decide in a particular case, was this an alien or a time traveler or a demon? Even after we've eliminated all the natural explanations, we need evidence. What we should not foolishly assume one without any evidence and say, oh, well, it must be extraterrestrials, because I don't even want to think about the possibility of it being demons. And we don't want to say, oh, it must be demons, because I don't even want to think about the possibility of it being an alien. What we need to do is take every phenomenon at face value until we have evidence that it should be taken in some other way. So since demons don't natively have physical bodies and don't natively need nuts and bolts spaceships to travel, if something shows up with a physical body and a nuts and bolts spaceship, my first thought would be it's an alien or a time traveler or some kind of physical being from elsewhere. I'm open to the idea it could be a demon, but you're going to need to show me evidence, because the fact it's got a physical form and a nuts and bolts spaceship would suggest it's not a demon. Just like if a human being shows up on an airplane and he's got a physical body and he's traveling in a nuts and bolts airplane, it could be a demon impersonating a human, but I don't have reason to suspect that. If a human shows up in a nuts and bolts airplane, I'm going to say it's a human with an airplane, because that's what it appears to be. If a creature with a physical body shows up in a nuts and bolts spaceship, but it's clearly not from Earth, I'm going to say, well, it looks like it's an extraterrestrial. You can convince me otherwise, but you're going to need actual evidence to do so, and not just supposition and not just claims about, well, I don't think there are aliens. Fine, you may not, but that's not evidence. I need to see evidence to decide among these possibilities.
Friend, thank you. I'm going to leave it there. I hope that was helpful to you. I think we can get another call in, so I'm trying to do as many as I can today with Jimmy. While we've got him, let's go to Andrew in Frisco, Texas, watching on YouTube Live. Andrew, go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hey, Jimmy. Thank you for taking my call. Very excited to be here. My question is regarding the Magi visiting Mary and Joseph in Bethlehem. From what I've heard and read, Jesus may have been as old as 2 years old by that point. But my question for you is, why would Mary and Joseph have left Nazareth, returned to Bethlehem, and remained there for potentially as long as 2 years, and not return to Nazareth after, the census or whatever I'd cause them to initially go to Bethlehem?
Well, so Mary and Joseph would go to Bethlehem periodically simply because they had land there. Either they personally did or someone in their family did. And that's why Joseph returned there for the census, whether it was a tax census or something else. And there is evidence it could be something else. But that's why he went there, because they or their family had land there. And they would also periodically return to Jerusalem, multiple times a year for the pilgrimage feasts that required you to go to Jerusalem. So even though they were normally based in Nazareth, they would go down to the Jerusalem area periodically, whether for the census or for a festival. And since their family had land in Bethlehem, it would be natural for them to stay in Bethlehem, which is just a few miles from Jerusalem. It's within, a couple hours walk. And so that's why, even though they were had been prior to the birth of Christ living in Nazareth up in Galilee, they had regular trips down to Jerusalem, down to the Jerusalem area, and to Bethlehem specifically. And it could have been on one of those trips where there was a business trip or a family visit or a festival, and that's when the Magi happened to show up.
Okay, Andrew?
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you,
No problem.
Andrew. Hey, if you're on the line, stay on the line. Jimmy's going to be here with us for another hour. If you haven't dialed yet and you'd like to try to get in while we are on this break, the number is 888-318-7884. It's open forum. That means anybody can call, whether you're Catholic or not, whether you're Christian or not, from anywhere, with any question at all for Jimmy Akin. 888-318-7884. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Open Forum with Jimmy Akin and the possibility of some groovy music right after this on Catholic Answers Live. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live, right in the midst of Advent. A very blessed Advent to you and all of yours. Thank you so much for joining us. We're always grateful to have you here with us. We appreciate that you take the time to spend some time with us. You can call if you've got a question. Perfect day to call. Jimmy Akin, open forum. You can call and ask anything you want. 888-318-7884. Jimmy is senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, of course. The author of The Bible is a Catholic Book, A Daily Defense, The Fathers Know Best, and many, many other books, including, the brand new 20 Answers book on the end times, and the brand new book, Words of Eternal Life, which, can I say it right now? Everybody should get it. You should just get it. At the very least, have it around. Maybe somebody who could benefit from it after you've done reading it will pick it up and read it. It's one of those. Just keep it around. It's very easy to read, but about the most important things in the world. Jimmy Akin, also the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Thanks for coming back for a second hour, Jimmy. Glad we didn't wear you out the first hour.
My pleasure. You wouldn't even wear me out after 4.
By the time we're done, it will be 4 today because of that pre-recording earlier. So far, you're holding up well, Jimmy, I got to say. Let's put you right back to work then, because there's about 1 million people on the line. Let's go to Dakota in Kentucky, watching on YouTube. Dakota, are you there with us?
Yeah.
Hi, Dakota. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Yeah, so I was wondering why why did the Catholic Church Council Laodicea transfer the solemnity of the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday?
It didn't.
Yeah, but it did.
No, but it didn't. Now, I happen to have the text of the canons of the Council of Laodicea in front of me. If you have them, you're welcome to read to me the passage where you perceive them as doing this. If not, I'll be happy to read it. So what would you prefer? Would you like to read to me, or would you like me to read to you?
Go ahead, read to me.
Okay, awesome. So the Council of Laodicea, number one, it was a local council. This was not an ecumenical council that affected everything in the whole Catholic Church. Laodicea is a city that's in the Roman province of Asia, which is in modern Turkey, and it's one of a number of cities where there was a Christian community in the early centuries. And in the 300s, the local churches around Laodicea did have a council there. They met to discuss certain matters and make certain rules about how things were going to proceed in their local area. But because this wasn't a worldwide council, it wasn't what's called an ecumenical council, it only affected things in the local area. So this council was not capable of making decisions for the entire church. It also, because of the age in which it was meeting, it tended to be very conservative and not to change things, but simply to reiterate things that were already in practice. Now, we have, from the New Testament, evidence that Jewish Christians, because they were Jewish, they would keep the Sabbath, as that was their ancestral custom, but then they would also keep Sunday as the Lord's Day because it was the day on which Jesus was raised. But Gentile Christians did not keep Saturday as the Sabbath. They didn't keep a Sabbath. They simply kept the Lord's Day. And we see that reflected in various passages in Scripture. Over the course of time, there came to be a conflict between Christians who thought you needed to live like a Jew and those who recognized that you don't. And St. Paul was a champion of the latter viewpoint, that Christians do not have to be Jews. They don't have to live like Jews in order to be good Christians. And so in his letter to the Colossians, he told the Colossians that they should not let anyone judge them in food or in drink, or whether you keep a Sabbath, a new moon, or a feast. And those were the 3 types of days on the Jewish liturgical calendar: the weekly feast, the monthly new moon, the weekly Sabbath, the monthly new moon, and the annual feasts like Passover. And so he said, don't let anybody judge you in regard to those, because those were a shadow that pointed forward to Christ. But now that Christ is here, we don't have to observe the shadow. Similarly, when the Council of Jerusalem met in Acts chapter 15, and this was about the year AD 49, they debated the question, do Gentile Christians have to be circumcised and become Jews in order to be Christians? And their answer was no. And they went a little further because, as James pointed out, James, the brother of the Lord, he pointed out, well, we've got these Jewish Christians in all these different cities, and they're going to have to get along with Gentile Christians. So to help them live together, let's at least ask the Gentile Christians to do a few things that they might not otherwise do. And so the council sent a letter saying, hey, you don't have to be circumcised, but we'd like you to do these 4 things. None of those 4 things was keep the Sabbath. So you've got Paul saying, don't let anybody judge you if you're not, and you have the Council of Jerusalem saying you don't have to be a Jew, you don't, and by implication, you don't have to keep the Sabbath since they didn't ask for them to. With that knowledge, we look and say, okay, what happened in the next stage of church history? And we find that in the early church, in the age of the church fathers, some Jewish Christians did continue to keep the Sabbath for a while, but most Christians who were of Gentile origin did not. So there was this parallel between the Sabbath or Saturday being kept by some Christians, especially of Jewish origin, but not by Gentile Christians. Then we come up to the 300s when the Council of Laodicea met, and they released a number of different canons, and one of them is Canon 16, which says the Gospels are to be read on the Sabbath with the other scriptures. So if you have Christians in church and they're reading the scriptures, because people didn't have their own personal Bibles at this point, they were far too expensive. When it talks about let them be read, it means in a church service. So if you have people who are meeting in a church on the Sabbath for the reading of the scriptures, you should read the Gospels on Saturday. You shouldn't neglect to do that. But down in Canon 29, it then says, Christians must not Judaize by resting on the Sabbath, but must work on that day, rather honoring the Lord's Day. So this canon is distinguishing between the Sabbath and the Lord's Day, between Saturday and Sunday, and it says, do not Judaize by resting on the Sabbath. So don't think you've got to follow this Jewish custom of resting on the Sabbath. Instead, what you want to do is honor the Lord's Day, and if they can, resting then, i.e. on the Lord's Day, on Sunday, resting then as Christians. But if any shall be found to be Judaizers, let them be anathema from Christ. So this is establishing that people who want to follow Jewish customs by worshiping on the Sabbath are going to get in trouble and risk excommunication, but those who, everybody should observe the Lord's Day as the day of Christ. Now, none of this is new. As we mentioned, this question about these 2 days goes all the way back to the first century, and Christians have been observing the Lord's Day, Sunday, since the first century because it's the day on which Christ was raised. The council is not transferring anything from one day to another. It's reiterating the fact that has always been known that Christians need to worship on the Lord's Day. It's not instituting anything new here. So even though in some Sabbatarian communities, this will be misrepresented as the Council of Laodicea made a change here, that's not actually what's happening, and nothing in the text says, we hereby change this.
Dakota, that's a lot. Does that all make sense to you?
No, not really. But, I mean,
you may disagree, but I think it makes sense.
Well, but what you just told me was that you said that we don't need to Judaize the Sabbath, correct?
Correct.
But give me your definition of Judaize.
To embrace a Jewish practice because one believes it is required by God.
But it is required by God because it's part of His 10 Commandments.
Okay, it is. Now, we're away from the Council of Laodicea now. We're shifting the question. I just want to note that. The 10 Commandments were a summary of the broader law of Moses that was given to the Jewish people. It's very obvious that the Ten Commandments are directed specifically to the Jewish people because you have references to Jewish history in the text of the Ten Commandments. For example, and if you look at the Sabbath commandment, it's, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. And the context goes on to talk about how God cared for you and brought you out of slavery. And it's referring to the Exodus event. That's something that happened to the Jewish people. It did not happen to the Celts or to the Aztecs, or to the Mayans, or the Chinese. This is something specific to the history of the Jewish people. And in the ancient world, the 7-day week was something that was unique to Israel. Other people did not practice it. So even though the Ten Commandments contain moral principles that are applicable to everybody, like don't kill, don't commit adultery, don't bear false witness, those apply to everybody. The ritual commandment of rest and worship on the 7th day of the week is something that was given specifically to the Jewish people and not to all of mankind. And that's why Paul in the New Testament, talking to Gentile Christians, Exodus is talking to Jews. Deuteronomy is talking to Jews, where we find the Ten Commandments. But in the New Testament, where we have material addressed to Christians, Paul says, don't let anybody judge you about your observance of a Sabbath day. And that helps clarify that was a requirement, keeping the 7th day specifically, was a requirement for the Jewish people prior to the time of Christ. It was a shadow that pointed forward to Christ, but now that Christ has come, it's no longer obligatory.
Dakota, we'll have to leave it there because we have to take a break, but I'm very grateful for your call. Hope you will maybe consider and call back as more questions emerge. We're happy to talk with you, Dakota. Right now, I have the great privilege of announcing that there's a brand new release at the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics, Tim Staples' new School of Apologetics course, Evidence for the Church. Understanding the Church in Scripture is now available, and for a limited time you can save $50 when you enroll in this online course. In Evidence for the Church, Tim shares hard-won insights into the apologetics of ecclesiology that will empower you to defend the Catholic Church to anyone, with more than 50 short, easy-to-watch, very well-produced video segments you can study at your own pace. Evidence for the Church will equip you to defend Holy Mother Church and bring souls to Jesus Christ through the institution He established on earth. You can enroll today at schoolofapologetics.com.
Catholic Answers Live.
The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connections' set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connections' website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Prayer doesn't have to be anything rigid or formal. Of course, we have countless ones we can turn to when words don't come to mind. So rote prayers are fantastic, but I also like to pray by listening to praise music, reading the Psalms, and just listening to God's voice. Keep in mind that prayer is a two-way endeavor. Sometimes we think it's just us talking and God listening. If that's what your prayer life has mainly consisted of, try getting used to listening to God speak to you. You'll hear beautiful and amazing things.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. It's open forum. Jimmy Akins here. You're welcome to call 888-31-TRUTH if you've got a question. 888-318-7884. I'm starting to feel the pressure. We're in the second hour, and there's still loads of folks on the phone, so we'll just keep moving. Let's go to New York City. New York City. Austin calling from New York City, watching on YouTube. Go ahead, Austin, with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, my question is, in the Eucharist, are the accidents of bread and wine attached to Christ's substance, or is it existing without a substance?
The language that the Church uses is that the accidents or appearances, that's what that word means. It doesn't mean unfortunate circumstances. It just means appearances. That the appearances of bread and wine are present, and behind those accidents, behind those appearances, is the reality or the substance of Christ, his body, blood, soul, and divinity. Now, whether the language of attachment is going to be used will depend on exactly how you're defining that. Also, and I would really, I don't know how much further I can go than that, because we're getting into an area where different theologians who are Orthodox will use different definitions for precise terms that the church has not defined. And you'll find different schools of thought that will use slightly different language to describe this, but the church has not definitively pronounced on which way of articulating this is true or is the one that must be used. It hasn't identified one of these modes of language and said that this is definitely the one we should use or the one that we're going to use when we describe this reality. And so consequently, it'll be a matter of theological opinion rather than church teaching. And when we get into matters of theological opinion, my preference is generally to be silent where the church is silent and not get dogmatic about it must be this way versus some other way.
Austin, thanks very much. I'm going to keep moving. Anonymous in Menifee, California, watching on YouTube. You are next. Anonymous, are you there with us?
Hi, hello?
Hello, Anonymous. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi. Okay, so I was actually wondering, like, what would you say to a person, who's been through, tremendous, pain and suffering in their life, and they're like, why would, God let this happen? How could, God who loves me, right, or supposedly, right, let all these, utterly terrible things happen and let me be in the situation? So, yeah.
Well, so we covered a bit of this in the previous hour, and I'll cover part of it again here, and I'll make the same recommendation I did there. So I'm someone who's had a lot of bad things happen in life. I'm a widower. I was widowed at a very early age. I never got to have children. My parents died much younger than they should have, both of them. My mom died 40 years before she should have, very suddenly. I've been through experiences of poverty. I've been through illness. I've been through lots of different things. And so the first thing I would say to someone who's been through a lot is, I sympathize. I understand. I've been there. I know what it's like. Also, God really does love you, and God really does have a purpose for these things. Now, I may not be able to tell you what the specific purpose is right now, but I can tell you the general purpose. The general reason that God allows these things to happen is because he'll bring good out of them. It is, in fact, the Catechism tells us that faith gives us the assurance that God would not allow an evil to occur if he didn't have a good that he was going to bring out of it. So he wouldn't even allow it. So whatever has happened to you and to me that was painful is something that God has a good that he will bring out of it one day that's at least of equal value to what happened to us. So he'll bring an equal or greater good out of everything bad that happens. Now, in some cases, we may be able to discern what that good was, even in this life with our limited perspective, but in other cases, we may not be able to discern in this life what that good was, but we may be able to in the next life when we'll have a broader perspective and we'll be able to ask God directly, what was the reason for that? What good did you bring out of that one? So that's kind of a nutshell of what I would say. I unpack all of that at much greater length in a talk I gave on the problem of evil, which is available. You can go to shop.catholic.com, and the name of the DVD it's on is The Problem of Evil. Very easy to remember. So Jimmy Akin, The Problem of Evil, and I talk for basically an hour to unpack that and how to talk with someone who's either been going through suffering or who has had their faith challenged by suffering. And I hope that'll be a help to you.
Thank you, Anonymous. I hope that will as well. I hope that call was helpful to you. Thank you for the call. We'll go now to Jake in Milltown, South Dakota, listening on Real Presence Radio. Glad to have you, Jake. You got a question for Jimmy?
Yes, I do, and thank you for taking my call from the bustling metropolis of Milltown, South Dakota out here.
How bustling is
my
it?
My question, we have a grand total of 8 people in Milltown.
Oh, congratulations.
Oh, wow.
Growing. Just growing by leaps and bounds.
You know, when one person moves to town, we have the largest increase percentage-wise of population in the state. So, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Tell you what, though, my question today stems from one that came from teaching some catechism students the other night on the Protestant idea of the rapture and the Catholic response. So you think about Matthew 24, 1 Thessalonians 4, and then Luke 17. They are utilized by Protestants to give evidence for a rapture occurring, where one will be taken and one will be left. What would be the appropriate Catholic interpretation of these verses, and then why?
Okay, so we talk about 1 Thessalonians 4:17 all the time on the program, so I won't go into that in detail, but I will give you the summary view. It is true in 1 Thessalonians 4 that Paul talks about an event where believers will be caught up to be with Jesus, but he doesn't say, and then they go back to heaven for several years, and then they come back and reign on earth physically for 1,000 years before the end of the world, which is how the rapture theory is normally understood in Protestant circles. Christians have always recognized that at the end, right before the final judgment, Jesus will descend and Christians will be caught up to be with him, and then he'll raise the dead and judge the living and the dead and start the eternal order. So that's quite true. Catholics and other Christians historically have not called that the rapture. The term rapture has only come up in about the last 170 years or so. It's a recent terminology that's only used in part of the Protestant community, not in all of the Protestant community. But if you want to call this event a rapture, you can, because raptio means to catch away. And people are going to be caught away to be with Jesus. It's just not going to be 1,000 years and more before the end of the world. It's going to be right at the end of the world. And you can show that by looking at the parallel in not only by reading the context in 1 Thessalonians, but also by reading the parallel in 2 Thessalonians, where Paul talks about the appearing of the Lord and our gathering to be with him and what's going to happen at that event. It's not before the reign of the Antichrist, it's at the end of the reign of the Antichrist, as the parallel in 2 Thessalonians makes clear. In Matthew 24, we're dealing with a section that's called the Olivet Discourse, because it's a discourse that's given when Jesus is on the Mount of Olives. And there is a parallel to this in Mark and a parallel to it in Luke. Mark's is the original version. In all three versions, it starts when Jesus prophesies the destruction of the Jerusalem temple. And in all three versions, the disciples then ask him, well, when is that going to be? And he starts giving the Olivet Discourse. In Matthew, there is a second question they ask, and there's a second set of parables, mostly in Matthew 25, that deal with the end of the world. But most of the discourse is going to be about the destruction of the Jerusalem temple in AD 70. That's the only issue that is on the table in Mark and in Luke. The second coming is not being discussed. In Matthew, the part about some being taken and others left is in the section that's on the destruction of the temple. It's in that same context. And Jesus says, talking about when the temple is going to pass away, but of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven nor the Son, but the Father only. As were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man, meaning in judgment on Jerusalem. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day when Noah entered the ark, and they did not know until the flood came and swept them away. So in the ancient world, it was the flood that swept people away. Now he's talking about the judgment that's going to come on Jerusalem, and he says some will be taken, meaning by that judgment, just like people had been taken by the flood, and others will be left. Others will survive it. So that's the basic, that's what's doing the taking of the taking away. This is not the rapture to be with Jesus in Matthew 24. It's being taken away by the judgment that is going to sweep over Jerusalem when the Roman armies invade. And some people are going to get taken away by that judgment and be killed. Others will survive it and remain.
Okay, Jake?
Yeah, sure. No, that helps a lot there. And funny enough, the Olivet Discourse, a nearby town, is Olivet and has a whole 37 people in it.
Oh, well.
Cool.
Hey,
Veritable
Jake.
metropolis.
Yeah, I hope you could fight that traffic and get home. If the rest of the town is out, there's 7 people in front of you. Right back after this.
There's only one. Catholic Answers Live.
Bishop Joseph Strickland of Tyler, Texas is one of the most courageous leaders in the church, known for his outspoken support of unborn life, Orthodox faith and morals, and reforming Catholic institutions. In his groundbreaking new book, Light and Leaven, he offers a forthright perspective on the state of the church today and calls on the lay faithful to meet its challenges boldly. Touching on topics including parish renewal, the centrality of the Eucharist, the need for prayer and silence in a noisy and distracted age, and the battle between good and evil in the church and world, Bishop Strickland's wise insights and evident love for souls will inspire and edify you. To order your copy of Light and Leaven, visit shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
To many people, even many Christians, purgatory is a fantasy, or worse, a wicked lie invented by the church to make salvation complicated and keep people in fear. But I'm here to tell you that purgatory is fact, not fiction. The Bible supports it, Christians have historically believed in it, and it makes theological sense. In my new book, Purgatory is for Real, I provide the evidence and reasoning to help you understand this controversial doctrine and demonstrate how it's actually a joyful, hopeful reality, not something shadowy and mysterious, but a sign of God's love and mercy. To get your copy of Purgatory is for Real, visit shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Tomorrow on More to Life, peace be with you.
Do you feel like someone or something is robbing you of your peace? We'll help you find rest.
That's tomorrow on More to Life. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
There it is. A little bit of groovy music. Every single person in Milltown dancing right now. All 8 of them. Thanks, Nick. Very nice. We should do an all Milltown open forum one day. Just 8 calls. We'll just take 8 calls that day. 888-318-7884, the number. Jimmy Akin, our guest. It's open forum, and you are welcome to call with any question at all. Let's go to Calgary, Canada. Tom in Calgary, Canada, watching on Catholic.com. Glad to have you with us, Tom. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Thank you. Jimmy, this is an honor. You've had a major effect on my life. My question is about our Christian obligation to help the poor. A Protestant pastor friend of mine argues that our obligation is only towards Christians. He uses verses like Matthew 25, whatsoever you did to the least of my brothers. He argues that means our brothers in Christ. What's the Catholic response to that? Is our obligation to all poor or just the Christian poor?
Well, I would be inclined to respond similarly to the way Jesus does in Luke chapter 10, because we're asking here, who is my brother, for purposes of this situation. And that's a question, essentially the same question that was put to Jesus with slightly different wording when he was asked, who is my neighbor? Because Jesus pointed out, the greatest commandment is love God The second great commandment is love your neighbor. And so Jesus was asked, well, who is my neighbor? And it's precisely for this reason, because some people in the ancient Jewish world would say, oh, well, that means you got to love your fellow Jew. That's who your neighbor is. It's your fellow Jew. You don't got to care about Gentiles. So you want to give charity to your fellow Jew. He's your neighbor, but you don't want to do that for those stinking Gentiles. And, we don't need no stinking Gentiles. So the
is that Mel
Jesus,
Brooks? Is that guy?
No, it's Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
Oh yeah, okay, all right.
and of course Jesus's mom was a treasure as the Sancta Madre. But the answer that Jesus gave to this question was to tell a parable. It's the parable of the Good Samaritan. So in the parable, you have a Jew who's been mugged, and he's been left by the side of the road. And a priest passes him, but doesn't help him. And a Levite passes him, but doesn't help him. This is like a pastor passes him and a deacon passes him in context, because priests and Levites were the equivalent of pastors and deacons in a Christian context. So we've got this Christian, he's been mugged. A pastor goes by him and doesn't help him. A deacon goes by him and doesn't help him. And then a Muslim who kind of shares belief in one God, but we don't get along at all, shows up and helps the guy and cares for him and pays for his wounds to be treated and so forth. And Jesus says, which one was the neighbor to the guy who got mugged? Well, it wasn't the pastor who ignored him, and it wasn't the deacon who ignored him. It was the Muslim who actually treated him and helped him. And Jesus says, go and do likewise. And this shows us that we should help people even across religious tribal boundaries. Like, are you a Jew or a Samaritan? Are you a Christian or a Muslim? We should treat everybody as our neighbor, no matter what group we're in. That's the way to be a true neighbor. And consequently, we should treat everyone that God has created as our neighbor. And this principle is illustrated in a more explicit way, less poetic, but more explicit, in Galatians chapter 6. Tom, since your friend is a Protestant pastor, he should be quite familiar with Galatians. And in Galatians chapter 6, Paul says, therefore, let us do good to all, and especially members of the household of God. So we do have a special responsibility to do good to fellow Christians, but we also have a responsibility that goes beyond that, to all, and not just to the household of God. So consequently, if he wants to say we don't need to have any concern for poor people because they're not Christians, he's running up against the teaching of Jesus and Paul, in my view.
Tom, thank you. Going to keep moving. Got to get to as many as we can. It's open forum. Lots of folks on the line. Let's go to Oliver. I don't have a location for Oliver, but Oliver, you are welcome. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Thank you. My question is quite personal to myself. I recently got engaged to an individual who was born Muslim and through discourse has since found organized religion of any sorts to be troubling. Or at least hard to swallow at the moment. But with the expectation that throughout a further life, I'm quite confident that I could bring her towards this domain. The difficulty is that recently, as of today, she has asked of me to, before her parents, profess in a conversation that I am Muslim on paper, so that way I may get the blessing to marry her, not have any difficulties in the future life, and just go on and continue like nothing is an issue. So my question is just this. Is it my pride that stands in the way that prevents me from performing this one apostate action that would possibly result in a wonderful future in which I have the potential to change another individual's life? Or is it truly a valid conviction that prevents me from wanting to do this one simple task?
Well, so I can't tell you what's in your own heart, so I can't tell you, is it your pride or is it a genuine conviction that's stopping you from doing this? What I can do is tell you, do not do it. Because unless you're a Muslim, you should not be professing faith in Islam. Jesus makes it very clear. If we deny him, he will deny us before his Father. Paul makes it very clear. He will be faithful to us if we're faithful to him, but if we are unfaithful to him, we have judgment to expect. Apostasy from the faith is a mortal sin. That doesn't mean it can't be forgiven, but it is a mortal sin. If you do it knowingly and deliberately and you die, you will go to hell. So apostatizing from Jesus Christ by saying, I'm a Muslim and I believe he was just a human prophet, that's gravely sinful, and it risks damnation. So under no circumstances could I suggest that you do this. I understand it's something that is commonly asked of people who are marrying Muslims, and then they will technically count you as a Muslim, but you should not do this. It is a grave sin to have faith in Jesus Christ and then renounce that faith and go elsewhere and turn your back on Jesus. You're flirting with damnation. So do not do that. I can't answer what it is in you that's telling you not to, but I can tell you objectively, do not do this. And the fact your fiance is asking for you to do this should also give you concern about whether this is the right path for you. Now, I know you said you thought with time you can encourage a person to change. That's something a lot, and maybe come into organized religion, maybe even come into Christianity, although you didn't mention that. This is a big mistake. It is a big mistake when people get married thinking, I'm going to change someone from what they are right now. Because when a person is trying to get married to you is when they are most motivated to make accommodations to you. Once they're married, once they've achieved their goal, they're going to be much less inclined to make major life changes on your behalf. Prudence suggests that what you see at the time you're getting married is the best it's going to be. Because it's when they're getting married, that's when they want to be on their best behavior, and they're going to slack off once the pressure is off and let it all hang out, as they speak, and let you see the other side of them. So you never want to go into a marriage expecting, this isn't really what I want, but I'll fix this person over time. Probably not. That's probably not what's going to happen. It doesn't mean it can't, but it's probably not. Probably what's going to happen is they're going to be less motivated to do what you want after you get married when they've already achieved that goal. So I would say, do not plan. If you want to marry this person, that's up to you. But do not plan on getting this person to be religious, or if they are religious, do not plan on getting this person to be anything other than Muslim. And if this person is asking you to profess Muslim faith now and doesn't understand why you would say no, because it's against the Christian religion to profess Muslim faith if you're not Muslim, then you should take another look at this relationship and whether it's really the right thing for you.
Okay, thank you,
Oliver.
very much.
I know that's a lot to process. Okay, all right. God bless you, brother. And you're welcome to call back if you need some follow-up on that. But thank you very, very much for the call. We better take a quick break. Jimmy Akin is...
Yeah, I wish I
Go
could.
ahead, Jimmy.
I wish I could be congratulatory and say nicer things, but it's important that we look at these things with a clear eye.
Indeed. And I sometimes people need a little time to process it because it was extremely clear what you said, and I just hope that Oliver will take the time to process what you just said. It's very much worth processing. Let's take our break. We'll be right back. More questions for Jimmy Akin on Open Forum right after this.
Your questions, Catholic Answers, live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
St. John Paul II stated that, for the disciple of Christ, evangelization is a duty, an obligation of love, and the Catechism of the Catholic Church states that evangelization is necessary for salvation.
So we know we're called, but how do we do it?
St. Paul Street Evangelization can help. To learn more, contact us at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
You know, I have a very hard time sometimes, and I'm so frustrated. I mean, frustrated. Somebody says, how'd you do all this, Mother? I say, I didn't. And they look at me, huh? The Lord did it. God does everything. Without me, He said, you do nothing.
For more information on Mother Angelica, visit Religious Catalog at EWTNRC.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, our guest. Lots of folks on the line. Going to just keep moving. Donnie in Vancouver, Canada, watching on YouTube Live. You're next. Go ahead.
Hi. Thank you so much for doing what you do. You guys are constantly helping me to reaffirm my faith, and it's great. So,
thank you, Donnie.
There's one question that I've asked priests over the years that I've always been curious about, and unfortunately, I've never really gotten a great answer, or a satisfactory answer, I should say. So I think about things as I'm a parent, so I think about things from being a parent and how God is our Father, and I think about my children and punishing them and things like that. So one of the things that I always think about is mercy, and I ask a stupid tongue-in-cheek question, like, am I more merciful than God? And I know I'm not, obviously, but when you think about it, it's like, I would never eternally punish my child. And so it's hard for me to understand eternal punishment and hell. Obviously, we separate ourselves from God, but it is one question that I'm like, I said to me once, I don't know. It's like, because I said, killed all the rest of my family. Eventually I would forgive this child because I always remember this is my child, and there's a part of me in that child. So how would you guys answer it?
So every analogy is helpful up to a point, because in any analogy you have two things that are similar in some ways. And the fact that they're similar can help you learn something about the fact that one object is similar to a second object can help you learn something or gain some insight about that second thing. But because they're not exactly the same thing, there are limits to the analogy. The two things are also different in various ways. And that's the challenge in using analogies, is to find the sweet spot where you're illuminating rather than misleading, based so that you're using the similarities and not making inferences based on the differences. I mean, you could say, well, I'm a father and God is a father and I'm a physical being, therefore God must be a physical being. Well, that would be wrong, because one of the differences between us and God is we are naturally physical, whereas God is not physical apart from the incarnation. So that would be a bad analogy that pushes the analogy of fatherhood beyond its proper limits. Well, something similar is the case when it comes to God and punishment. Here on earth, when one person punishes another, it's a deliberate infliction of pain in order to accomplish some purpose. And in the case of parental punishment, it's for the child's own good. This is something that the letter to the Hebrews talks about, is that our fathers punished us, and in the same way, God chastises every son he receives for our own holiness. So when God causes or allows bad things to happen to us as his children, it is for a good. It's to help us grow. It's not eternal. Once we've grown in holiness, we won't experience that anymore. So that indicates we need to look at so-called eternal punishment in a somewhat different light. When you look at passages that talk about eternal punishment, they tend not to depict God as a father. It doesn't say God eternally punishes his children as a father, because fathers don't eternally punish their children. Instead, those passages tend to depict God as a king, and kings will do permanent things to people, like put them to death or permanently banish them or things like that. And so we tend to get the kingly metaphor or the master metaphor whenever we have eternal punishment in view, because it's different than the way a father acts, at least normally. Now, there are situations in which a father may do something connected with a son or other child that is permanent in nature. If the child says, okay, I'm grown up, I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore, I hate you and I'm out of here, the father may say, it breaks my heart, I'm sorry, but I respect that. If you don't want to have contact with me, I won't have contact with you. And they respect the child's adult decision. And that is basically what's happening in the case of eternal so-called damnation. It is humans who are choosing to permanently sever their connection with God, and God respects that. He doesn't want that, but he respects it. Now, it so happens that by cutting themselves off from God, who is the source of all goodness and joy, they're condemning themselves to permanent frustration. But God is not actively inflicting that on the model of punishment. This is the way the Catechism conceives of it. This is the natural consequences of cutting yourself off from God. You're going to be frustrated because you're denying yourself joy. But if you really do that, God will allow it to happen out of respect for you. It is not a lack of divine mercy that prevents God from taking you back. If you turned around, and this is the point of the parable of the prodigal son, if you turned around, God would take you back. In fact, the Catechism says God would even take the angels back if they repented, but they don't. And it seems that in the case of angels who've made a choice against God and human beings who have died making a choice against God, their will becomes fixed, and God honors that, but God would take them back if they repented. They just don't, because that's not how their will works anymore. And so this is not a case of God actively inflicting punishment on one of his children on the model of a father and saying, I'm actively going to cause this person pain forever. That is not what God is doing. God would take the people back into his joy if they repented. They simply don't want to. And he respects that.
Donnie, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to keep moving. Before we get to the end of the show, I don't want to run out of time and not say this. I want to say thanks to Annie for handling the phones for us today. Great job, Annie, and to Mary for handling the video for us. I appreciate both of you being there and doing that. Those are relatives of Jesus, Anne and Mary. That's his grandmother and mother. And Nick, on the phones,
Anne and Mary are a little younger, though. Neither one of them is at 2000.
And I can't think of any relatives of Jesus named Nick, so it was probably a camel in the neighborhood somewhere named Nick. And now we go to another Nick in Atlantic City, New Jersey, listening or watching on Catholic.com. Go ahead, Nick, with your question for Jimmy.
Great show, guys. Real quick, prior to I'll make this short and sweet. Prior to the Second Vatican Council, which allowed some exceptions for non-Catholics to receive communion, were there any exceptions prior to the Second Vatican Council where non-Catholics in rare circumstances could receive communion? And if no, could you explain the development of doctrine in this area and why that teaching could be changed? Thank you.
It's okay. Well, it could be changed because the contrary had never been defined anything that's not infallibly set one particular way is potentially subject to development. And it had never been infallibly taught that non-Catholic Christians can never, under any circumstances, receive Holy Communion. And so that was something that was capable of development. And over the course of the 20th century, as it was recognized, as some of the passions cooled from prior historical conflicts, and as we started talking to each other more, it was recognized we have a greater degree of things in common than had previously been recognized. We're no longer hostile to each other the way we had been in the past, and so it could make sense in various circumstances to allow non-Catholics to have some access to the Catholic sacraments, particularly in the case of Eastern Christians who actually have all of the same sacraments and believe in them the way we do, at least in broad strokes. In the case of Protestants, it would be a little bit different, but it would still be possible in some circumstances for that to happen. So that's a general sketch of what happened. Now, were there exceptions made prior to Vatican II? In the course of the previous 1900 years of church history, yes, there were exceptions. In the case of what did the law in the Latin Rite say, and did it admit of any exceptions at all prior to Vatican II in the Latin Rite of the Church? That's something I haven't looked at for a while, and I'm afraid I'd have to refresh my memory on that.
So we'll leave it there, Nick. Let's see if we can get Joshua. And Joshua in Huntington Beach, California, you have to be super quick if you want an answer from Jimmy. Can you do that?
Yes, I can.
All right. Go right ahead.
So my question is, in Acts 38 to 39, Gamaliel says, if it is of human origin, it will fail. But if it is from God, you will not be able to stop these men. You will only be able to find yourselves fighting against God. But what about other religions like Hinduism and Islam? Why are they still around today, even when the religion?
So this is in Acts chapter 5, and this is an opinion being expressed by Gamaliel, depending on how you want to say it. And he was a very famous Jewish sage. We know about him from outside the New Testament. He's mentioned, for example, in the Talmud. And this is an opinion that he was expressing. And Luke, as a historian, is accurately reporting the opinion that was expressed by Rabban Gamaliel. So that is a separate question than is Gamaliel's opinion true, and to what extent is it true? Because Gamaliel recognized that God relates to the people of Israel in a special way. God is not going to allow his people Israel to be fundamentally deceived in the long term. And so anything that would fundamentally deceive or corrupt Israel is something God will not allow, because he's promised to preserve a seed, at least a remnant, for Abraham. And that promise has to be fulfilled. So if this emergent Christian movement is not of God, it will not ultimately be able to deceive Israel. On the other hand, if it is of God and you fight it, if it's the fulfillment of Israel's hopes, like the Christians claim, then you would be fighting God by opposing Christianity. So all of that is true in terms of how God relates to Israel, to his people, to his covenant people that he's given promises to. But it doesn't tell us anything about what happens outside of Israel. So you could have religions unrelated to Israel, like Hinduism or Buddhism or whatever else, that may have elements of the truth, but also may be very wrong, just because they may grow to substantial size or go on for lengthy periods in history, is something that may be true, but it's something God allows, and because he doesn't protect their people in the same way that he protects his own covenant people, Israel.
Joshua, thank you very much. Thank you, Jimmy Akin, for a couple of great hours.
Hey, my pleasure.
Tomorrow, Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, new episode, this one on Carlos Castaneda. I can't wait to listen to it, and you should, any chance you get, drop in and listen to Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Tomorrow, I believe we're doing the kids show. I think we'll do the kids show tomorrow. So if you've got a kid, or if you are a kid and you want to call, just get permission. Give a call tomorrow. We'll see you then, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.